The church bells rang softly across the little town of Willow Creek. It was a quiet October afternoon. Golden leaves drifted lazily across the cemetery path. Friends, neighbors, old classmates, former co-workers, nearly everyone had come to say goodbye to Samuel Brooks. He had lived in Willow Creek for 86 years. Yet if someone asked what he had done for a living, few people would mention his career. Instead, they would smile and say, Samuel was the kind of man who never drove past someone who needed help. Michael Brooks stood quietly beside the fresh mound of earth. The cool autumn breeze carried the scent of pine trees through the cemetery. His grandfather had never liked grand speeches, so there hadn't been one. Only hymns, warm embraces, and stories shared in whispers. That felt exactly right. As the last guest slowly walked away, Pastor Daniel approached Michael. In his hands rested a small wooden box, dark walnut, smooth with age, brass corners worn from decades of careful use. I believe your grandfather wanted you to have this. Michael accepted it gently. Thank you. He left very specific instructions. The pastor smiled. He said, don't let anyone throw this away, especially Michael. Michael couldn't help smiling. That sounds like Grandpa, back at Samuel's little farmhouse. Silence filled every room. The old house smelled faintly of cedar wood, fresh coffee, and the apple cinnamon candles Grandma Evelyn had loved before she passed away years earlier. Almost nothing had changed. Samuel had never believed in replacing things that still worked. The rocking chair still faced the front window. The kitchen clock ticked steadily. His favorite wool sweater still hung behind the pantry door. Everything waited patiently, as though expecting him to return from the grocery store at any moment. Michael carried the wooden box into the living room. He placed it carefully on the old oak table. For several minutes, he simply looked at it. Some boxes deserve to be opened immediately. Others deserve a moment of gratitude first. Finally, he lifted the brass latch. The lid opened with a soft creak. Inside, resting on dark blue velvet, lay an old silver pocket watch. Its chain was neatly coiled beside it. Tiny scratches covered the polished case, evidence of a lifetime carried in the same pocket. Michael smiled. He remembered that watch. As a little boy, he used to beg Grandpa Samuel to let him hold it. Samuel always did, but only after washing their hands first. This old fellow has been through enough, he would joke. Michael picked up the watch. It felt heavier than he remembered. Solid, comforting, reliable. Just like Samuel himself, he pressed the tiny button. The cover sprang open. The ivory-colored dial looked beautiful despite its age. Roman numerals circled the face. The glass remained remarkably clear, but one thing stood out immediately. The hands had stopped. One pointed at the 4, the other, just past 17 minutes. 4点17分, exactly as Michael remembered. The watch had always shown the same time, for as long as he could remember. As a child, he had asked countless times, Grandpa, why don't you fix it? Samuel would smile gently, close the watch, slip it back into his vest pocket, and answer. Some moments are too important to let time move past them. Michael never understood. Not then. Beneath the watch, folded neatly into a square, lay a handwritten envelope. Across the front, only 2 words appeared. For Michael, his grandfather's familiar handwriting immediately brought tears to his eyes. He carefully unfolded the letter. My dear Michael, if you are reading this, then I've finally gone somewhere your grandmother has been waiting for me. Michael smiled through wet eyes. Even now, Grandpa Samuel had found a gentle way to speak about death. The letter continued. You'll probably be tempted to repair my watch. Please don't. Not yet. Michael frowned slightly. First, find out why it stopped. When you understand that, you'll know why it should never run again. Nothing more. No explanation. No clues. Only Samuel's signature. And beneath it, one final sentence. Some answers can only be found by talking to people who remember. Michael folded the letter carefully. The room suddenly felt larger, quieter, almost expectant. He walked toward the front window. Outside, across the road, Mrs. Eleanor Harris slowly swept autumn leaves from her porch. She had lived next door for over 50 years. She had known Grandpa Samuel longer than almost anyone. Michael wondered, had she ever heard the story behind 417? That evening, neighbors arrived carrying casseroles, homemade pies, and warm bread, just as people in Willow Creek always had. No one stayed very long. Most simply wanted to share a memory. One man remembered Samuel repairing bicycles for neighborhood children without charging a penny. A widow remembered finding fresh firewood stacked on her porch every winter, never knowing who delivered it. A retired mail carrier smiled. Your grandfather always carried peppermint candies. He said grown-ups needed surprises too. The room filled with quiet laughter. As the evening drew to a close, Mrs. Eleanor lingered near the doorway. She looked toward the pocket watch resting on the table. Her smile slowly faded. You found it. Michael nodded. I did. She stared at the stopped hands. 4:17. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she whispered, I always wondered if he'd ever tell you. Michael's heartbeat quickened. You know why it stopped? Eleanor slowly shook her head. No, but... She looked toward the old bridge visible beyond the maple trees. I know. Everything changed after that afternoon. She pulled her coat a little tighter against the cool evening air, then quietly added, Go talk to Mr. Thomas Reed tomorrow. He was there. There? Michael asked. Eleanor nodded, looking once more at the watch. At exactly 4:17. The next morning, Willow Creek woke slowly. A thin blanket of fog drifted across the cornfields beyond town. Golden sunlight filtered through towering maple trees, painting the quiet streets with warm shades of amber and gold. Michael carried his grandfather's pocket watch inside his coat pocket. Every few minutes, his hand instinctively rested against it. The cold silver case somehow made him feel less alone. Mr. Thomas Reed lived only 3 blocks away. At 92 years old, he still insisted on mowing his own lawn, still polished his old pickup truck every Saturday, still greeted everyone with the same warm smile. Samuel often joked, if Thomas ever sits still for too long, someone should call a doctor. Michael found him sitting on the front porch. A steaming mug of coffee rested beside his rocking chair. An old radio quietly played hymns from decades ago. Thomas smiled the moment he saw Michael. You've got Samuel's eyes. Michael smiled. People always said that. They were right. Thomas motioned toward the empty rocking chair beside him. Sit. I had a feeling you'd come. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply watched squirrels gathering acorns beneath the oak tree. Samuel had always believed conversations shouldn't be rushed. Thomas had learned that lesson well. Finally, Michael reached into his coat. He carefully placed the silver pocket watch on the small wooden table between them. Thomas stopped rocking immediately. His smile slowly disappeared. His eyes rested on the motionless hands. 4:17. He removed his glasses, then quietly whispered, So, he never fixed it. Michael shook his head. He asked me not to. Thomas nodded slowly. Of course he did. Michael leaned forward. Mrs. Eleanor said everything changed after one afternoon. Thomas looked toward the old bridge in the distance, barely visible through the trees. His voice became softer. I wasn't there from the beginning. I only saw the end. He folded his weathered hands together. It was 20 years ago, early November. The leaves had almost all fallen. Samuel had just finished buying groceries. He stopped here first. Thomas smiled. He complained that apples were getting too expensive. Both men laughed quietly. That sounded exactly like Samuel. We were drinking coffee. Thomas continued. When we heard tires squeal, he paused. Not because he had forgotten, because some memories deserve to be carried carefully. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just wrong. Samuel stood immediately, without finishing his coffee, without putting on his coat, without saying goodbye. He simply started running. I shouted, Sam, where are you going? Thomas smiled sadly. He answered while running, somebody might need help. And then, he was gone. Michael looked down at the watch. His grandfather had always been that kind of man. If someone needed help, everything else could wait. Thomas sighed gently. I couldn't run like Samuel, not even then, so I followed in my truck. The old man stared toward the bridge again. His eyes no longer saw the present. They saw another autumn afternoon. Long ago, when I arrived, the accident had already happened. A small blue sedan had slid into the ditch beside the river. The front wheels were buried in mud. The driver's door wouldn't open. Michael listened without moving. There weren't many people. Thomas continued. Just Samuel. And one frightened little girl. The child's mother had managed to climb out, but her daughter was still trapped in the back seat. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. I'll never forget Samuel. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't acting like a hero. He kept smiling, so the little girl wouldn't be afraid. He knelt beside the broken window. Thomas said quietly, and spoke to her as though they were sitting together in Sunday school. Hi there, my name's Sam. Would you help an old fellow solve a little problem? Michael smiled. Even in an emergency, Samuel chose kindness before fear. Thomas continued. The little girl stopped crying. She looked at Samuel and nodded. Samuel reached carefully through the shattered window, not pulling, not rushing, only reassuring. You're doing wonderfully. We're almost there. Within moments, the child was safely in his arms. Thomas looked down at his own hands. I've never forgotten what happened next. The little girl wrapped both arms around Samuel's neck and wouldn't let go. Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. Thomas smiled. Samuel just held her, as though she were his own granddaughter. Several more people arrived. An ambulance followed. Police officers secured the road. Everything slowly settled. It wasn't until later, Thomas continued, that Samuel noticed his pocket watch. It had fallen onto the pavement. Michael looked immediately at the watch resting on the table. Thomas nodded. The glass had cracked. The hands had stopped. Exactly. 4:17 分, Michael whispered. So that's when it happened. Thomas slowly shook his head. No. Michael frowned. No? The watch stopped at 4:17. Thomas said softly. But that wasn't the reason Samuel kept it that way. Silence settled between them. The wind gently stirred the autumn leaves across the porch. Thomas reached into his shirt pocket. He carefully removed an old folded newspaper clipping. Its paper had yellowed with age. Across the top, a small headline read, "Local man helps. Family after bridge accident." There was only one small photograph, a blurry image of emergency workers. No names, no interview, no celebration. Michael looked confused. Grandpa hated attention. Thomas smiled. You noticed. The reporter came to Samuel's house. Wanted to write a feature story. What did Grandpa say? Thomas laughed quietly. He thanked the young reporter and closed the front door. He told me later, if people remember my name, they might forget the little girl. I'd rather they remember she was saved. Michael stared silently at the watch. For the first time, he began to understand. His grandfather hadn't kept the watch because it was broken. He had kept it because it reminded him that one ordinary afternoon, stopping for someone else, had become the most important moment of his life. As Michael slipped the watch back into his pocket, Thomas spoke one final sentence, very quietly, almost as though he were afraid the wind might carry it away. I never learned what happened to that little girl. He looked toward Michael. But I've always hoped. She grew up knowing someone believed her life was worth stopping for. Michael looked once more at the silver watch. The hands remained frozen forever. 4:17分. For the first time, they no longer looked broken. They looked like a promise, still waiting to be understood. Monday morning arrived quietly in Willow Creek. The autumn fog had finally lifted. Sunlight spilled across Main Street, warming the brick sidewalks that Samuel Brooks had walked for more than 60 years. Michael parked in front of the old public library. It looked exactly as he remembered from childhood. The same white columns, the same brass door handles polished, smooth by generations of hands. The same grandfather clock standing proudly in the entrance hall. Asaboy. Michael had loved watching that clock. Grandpa Samuel always smiled whenever they walked past it. He would gently place one hand on Michael's shoulder and say, "A clock doesn't tell us what matters, son. It only reminds us that every minute gives us another chance to do something kind." Back then, Michael thought it was simply another one of Grandpa's sayings. Now, those words carried an entirely different weight. Mrs. Helen Carter, the head librarian, greeted him warmly. She had retired twice already, yet somehow, she still spent 3 mornings each week organizing local history. When she saw Samuel's pocket watch resting in Michael's hand, her expression softened. Your grandfather never came here without that watch. Michael smiled. I've been trying to understand why. Helen looked thoughtful. There may be someone who can help. She led him into the library basement. Rows of neatly labeled newspaper archives filled the room. Old photographs, town records, scrapbooks donated by families over the decades. Helen gently opened a large binder marked Willow Creek Gazette, November, 20 years ago. There wasn't much coverage, she explained. Samuel asked the newspaper not to make a story out of him. Michael wasn't surprised. That sounded exactly like his grandfather. They slowly turned the pages together. Harvest festivals, church bake sales, school football scores, town council meetings. Then, a tiny article tucked into the bottom corner of page 4, barely larger than a postcard. The headline read, Local Family Escapes Bridge Accident. No names appeared, only a short paragraph. It mentioned that an unidentified passerby had helped rescue a young child before emergency crews arrived. Nothing more. No interview. No photograph of Samuel. No celebration. Michael smiled quietly. Grandpa had succeeded. The story had remained about the family, not about himself. As Helen carefully closed the binder, she paused. Oh, I almost forgot. She reached into another folder. Inside rested an old black and white photograph. It had never appeared in the newspaper. The picture showed the bridge, several emergency vehicles, and one elderly man sitting quietly on the guardrail. His clothes were muddy. His hair was soaked. In his hands, he held something small. Michael recognized it immediately. The silver pocket watch. He wasn't looking at the accident. Helen whispered. He just kept staring at the watch. Michael studied the photograph carefully. Something felt unusual. Samuel wasn't sad. He wasn't frightened. He looked grateful. Helen pointed toward the back of the photograph. Someone had written a short note in blue ink. Samuel's handwriting. Every minute after this belongs to someone else. Michael stared at the sentence. His throat tightened. What did he mean? Helen slowly shook her head. I never asked. Samuel wasn't a man who explained everything. He believed some lessons needed time. Leaving the library, Michael drove toward the edge of town. There was one more person he needed to see. Retired Sheriff Harold Benson. Harold was 90 years old now. His hearing wasn't what it used to be. His hands trembled slightly when he poured coffee, but his memory, especially for important days, remained remarkably sharp. The old sheriff welcomed Michael into his farmhouse. When he noticed the pocket watch, he smiled. So Sam finally let someone else carry it. Michael sat quietly. I've learned about the accident, but everyone keeps saying, that's not the whole story. Harold nodded slowly. It isn't. For several moments, he stared out the kitchen window. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt respectful. Finally, he spoke. When we arrived, the little girl was already safe. The mother was crying. The ambulance crew took over. Sam should have gone home, but he didn't. Michael frowned. What happened? Harold smiled gently. The little girl wouldn't let go of him, even after the paramedics arrived. She kept holding his hand. She was terrified. So, Sam simply sat down beside the ambulance. He stayed, nearly an hour. Doing what? Michael asked softly. Harold chuckled. Talking about birds. Birds? He pointed toward the trees. He asked her which bird she liked best. They counted robins, blue jays, cardinals, anything to keep her mind away from fear. Michael laughed through tears. Only Grandpa Samuel would comfort a frightened child. By talking about birds, Harold continued. Before the ambulance finally left, the little girl asked him one question. Michael leaned forward. What did she ask? Harold closed his eyes for a moment, as though hearing the child's voice all over again. Will you forget me? The room became completely still. Michael's eyes filled with tears. He already knew exactly how Grandpa must have answered. Harold smiled. He took out his pocket watch. He looked at it. Then he slipped it back into his pocket. And he told her, every time I look at my watch, I'll remember today. So no, I'll never forget you. Michael lowered his head. Suddenly, everything made sense. Samuel hadn't kept the broken watch because it reminded him of an accident. He kept it because it reminded him of a promise. Harold quietly added, a few weeks later, I offered to pay for the repair. Michael looked up, and Grandpa said no. Harold smiled. He told me, if the watch starts running again, I might forget to stop for people. Silence filled the farmhouse. Outside, a flock of geese crossed the autumn sky. Michael held the pocket watch tightly in his hands. The frozen hands no longer seemed broken. They had become a quiet reminder that sometimes the most meaningful moments in life are the ones that ask us to stop, so someone else can keep going. Before Michael left, Harold walked slowly to an old filing cabinet. He opened the bottom drawer. Inside rested one faded manila envelope. Across the front, written in careful block letters, were 6 simple words. Family moved to Cedar Ridge. Harold handed it to Michael. I think. He smiled gently. It's finally time someone thanked your grandfather. Michael looked at the address inside. A town nearly 3 hours away. For 20 years, the little girl had been only a name lost to memory. Now, she had a place. Perhaps she had a family. Perhaps she had children of her own. Perhaps she had spent her whole life wondering about the kind old man who promised never to forget her. Michael slipped the envelope into his coat beside the pocket watch. He looked toward the fading afternoon sun. The watch still read 4:17 分. But, for the first time, Michael knew exactly where his journey would lead next. 3 days later, Michael left Willow Creek before sunrise. The old pickup truck rolled quietly down the empty highway. Beside him, resting safely inside a small leather pouch, was Grandpa Samuel's silver pocket watch. The hand still pointed to 4:17, the same silent reminder that had now become the reason for his journey. The road stretched through rolling farmland, small country churches, and quiet little towns where people still waved at strangers. Samuel had loved roads like these. He used to say, the best conversations usually happen between one town and the next. Michael smiled. He could almost hear Grandpa's voice riding beside him. Nearly 3 hours later, a wooden sign appeared along the roadside. Welcome to Cedar Ridge. Population 6,842. It was the kind of town where flower baskets hung from every lamppost. Children rode bicycles without hurry. Neighbors still greeted one another by name. Michael immediately understood why someone would choose to build a life here. Using the address from Sheriff Benson's envelope, he drove to a modest white farmhouse at the edge of town. A small vegetable garden filled the front yard. Bird feeders hung from 2 maple trees. An elderly golden retriever slept peacefully on the porch. Everything about the place felt calm, comforting, lived in. Michael parked and walked slowly toward the front steps. For a moment, he simply stood there. 20 years. 20 years had passed since Grandpa Samuel had promised a frightened little girl. I'll never forget you. What if she had forgotten him? What if she had moved away? What if this was the wrong house? Before he could knock, the front door opened. A woman in her early 60s stepped outside carrying a watering can. Her silver hair was tied neatly behind her head. Her smile carried the quiet warmth that often comes from a lifetime spent caring for others. She looked at Michael politely. Can I help you? Michael suddenly found himself nervous. I hope so. My name is Michael Brooks. The woman's expression remained pleasant. I've come from Willow Creek. Still, nothing changed. Then Michael slowly reached into his coat. He opened his hand. Resting on his palm was the silver pocket watch, frozen forever at 4:17. The watering can slipped gently from the woman's hand. Water spilled across the porch. She never noticed. Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. One trembling hand covered her mouth. She whispered, "So, it really was him." For several seconds, neither of them moved. Finally, she stepped forward, very carefully, almost reverently. She touched the edge of the watch. I've dreamed about seeing this again. Michael's voice became soft. Were you? The little girl? She nodded slowly. My name is Grace. I've waited most of my life to thank your grandfather. She invited Michael inside. The farmhouse was warm, simple, filled with family photographs, children, grandchildren, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, ordinary moments lovingly preserved. One photograph immediately caught Michael's attention. It showed Grace wearing light blue hospital scrubs, standing beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Both were smiling. You worked at the hospital? Michael asked. Grace nodded. For 34 years. I retired last spring. She poured 2 cups of tea before quietly saying, "I never planned to become a nurse." Michael looked surprised. "No." Grace smiled gently. "When I was 7, I was afraid of everything." She looked out the kitchen window. "As strange as it sounds, I don't remember much about the accident. I don't remember the crash. I don't remember the ambulance. I don't even remember going home. What I remember," she paused, "is one kind old man." Michael listened without speaking. He smiled the whole time. He talked about birds. He told me cardinals stay close to the people they love. He pointed at clouds and asked me what shapes I could see. And when I cried, he never told me not to. He just stayed. Grace looked toward the pocket watch resting on the kitchen table. I was certain he had somewhere more important to be, but he never acted impatient. He made me feel. She searched for the right words, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Tears quietly filled Michael's eyes. That sounded exactly like Samuel Brooks. Grace smiled through her own tears. When I became a nurse, I realized something. Medicine heals the body, but kindness, it heals fear. I learned that from your grandfather. Michael looked around the room. So every patient, Grace nodded. I tried to give them what he gave me. Time. She laughed softly. My coworkers always teased me. They said I spent too long sitting with lonely patients. I told them, sometimes 5 extra minutes is the best medicine we have. Michael smiled. Grandpa Samuel would have loved hearing that. Grace stood and walked toward an old wooden bookshelf. She carefully removed a faded scrapbook. Its pages had yellowed with age. Inside were photographs from hospital volunteer events, Christmas parties, community dinners, children holding handmade cards, elderly patients smiling beside nurses. Then she turned to one particular page. Tucked carefully beneath a clear plastic sleeve was an old drawing, made with crayons. The paper was wrinkled. The colors had faded, but the picture remained unmistakable. A little girl, holding hands with an old man. Between them, a small silver circle, attached to a chain. Above the drawing, childlike handwriting read, "The nice grandpa who stayed with me." Michael could no longer hold back his tears. Grace gently touched the drawing. "I made this the week after the accident. My mother wanted to throw it away years later." She smiled. "I wouldn't let her, because I was afraid I might someday forget his face." Michael reached into his pocket. He carefully placed Samuel's watch beside the drawing. The silver reflected softly in the afternoon sunlight. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Words simply weren't necessary. Finally, Grace looked toward Michael. "There is something I've never told anyone." Michael looked up. "What is it?" She took a slow breath. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "The day your grandfather saved me, he also gave me something else. Something I've carried for 20 years. She slowly stood, walked toward the hallway, and disappeared into another room. Moments later, she returned holding a small wooden box, smaller than a jewelry case. Its brass latch had grown dull with age. Grace placed it carefully on the table between them. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked at Michael, then softly said, "I think your grandfather always hoped this would find its way back to your family." Grace placed the small wooden box gently on the kitchen table. For a long moment, neither she nor Michael reached for it. The afternoon sunlight filtered through lace curtains, filling the room with a quiet golden glow. Outside, a pair of cardinals landed on the bird feeder near the window. Grace smiled softly. "He always loved cardinals." Michael nodded. "Grandpa used to say they remind us that love never really leaves." Grace looked toward the birds. "I still believe that." Her fingers rested lightly on the old brass latch. "It took me 20 years before I was ready to open this again." Michael looked surprised. "You haven't opened it?" She slowly shook her head. "No, he asked me not to." Michael's heart skipped. "Grandpa?" Grace nodded. "He told me, one day, someone from my family will come looking for answers. When they do, open this together." Michael stared at her. Grandpa Samuel had expected this day. Not next year, not 5 years later, however long it took. He believed kindness always found its way home. Grace gently lifted the lid. Inside, there was no money, no jewelry, no valuable heirloom, only 3 simple things: a folded note, a tiny wooden cardinal, and A little blue ribbon. The ribbon was faded from age. Its edges were worn. Michael frowned. "What is this?" Grace smiled through tears. "It belonged to my hair." She laughed quietly. "I was wearing pigtails that day. When the ambulance was leaving, I started crying again. I didn't want him to leave." She carefully picked up the ribbon. He untied one ribbon from my hair and asked if he could keep it. Michael smiled. "That sounds like Grandpa." Grace nodded. He said, "Now I have something to remind me that brave little girls grow up." She looked down at the ribbon. I never knew. He had kept the other one. Beneath the ribbon rested another ribbon, identical. Samuel had quietly kept its matching pair for the rest of his life. Michael felt tears forming again. All these years, Grandpa had carried not only a broken watch, but also half of a frightened little girl's ribbon. Not because it had value, because it carried a memory. Grace reached for the tiny wooden cardinal. It had clearly been carved by hand. The edges were imperfect. The paint had faded, yet it radiated warmth. "I remember this," she whispered. "He carved it while I was recovering." Michael looked surprised. "He carved this himself?" Grace nodded. "He visited the hospital a week later. He brought this little bird. He told me, 'Whenever you feel lonely, remember that cardinals always find their way home.'" Grace smiled. "I kept it beside my bed for years." Michael gently held the tiny bird. His grandfather had never considered himself an artist. Yet every Christmas, he carved little wooden animals for neighborhood children, each one slightly different, each one made with patience. Michael suddenly remembered. There had always been wood shavings in Grandpa's workshop. As a child, he never wondered where they went. Now he knew. They became little gifts, never sold, simply given away. Finally, Grace unfolded the letter. The paper had yellowed with age. Samuel's familiar handwriting filled only one page. She looked at Michael. "I've never read this. I wanted to wait." Together, they began reading. "My dear Grace, if you're reading this with Michael, then I kept my promise." Grace stopped. Her tears began falling silently. Michael continued reading aloud. "You probably think I rescued you that afternoon. The truth is, you rescued something inside me. After my wife Evelyn passed away, I had forgotten how to smile. I was moving through life, but I wasn't really living it." Michael paused. He had never known this. Grandpa rarely spoke about grief. The letter continued. "Then one frightened little girl asked me, 'Will you forget me?' That question reminded me that everyone wants the same thing. Not money, not success, not perfect health. We simply want to know that our lives matter to someone." Grace quietly covered her eyes. The room became completely silent. Michael kept reading. "That afternoon, you gave me a reason to keep noticing people again, to keep stopping, to keep listening, to keep smiling. So if you ever believed I saved your life, please know this. You saved mine too." Neither of them spoke. They simply allowed the words to settle into the quiet room. Several minutes passed before Grace finally whispered, "I thought he was helping me." She smiled through tears. "I never imagined I was helping him." Michael folded the letter carefully. For the first time since Grandpa's funeral, his grief felt different, lighter, not because he missed Samuel any less, but because he finally understood the kind of man his grandfather had truly been. Not someone who changed the world through great achievements, someone who changed it, one person at a time. Grace stood and walked toward the kitchen window. Outside, the two cardinals were still perched together. "They still come every afternoon," she said, almost at the same time. Michael checked the pocket watch. "Still, 4:17 分." He smiled. "It seems Grandpa is keeping his appointment." Grace laughed softly. Then her expression became thoughtful. "There is one more thing." Michael looked up. "What is it?" She walked to a small writing desk in the corner of the room, opening its top drawer. She removed a worn leather notebook. Its cover had faded with age. Across the front, in Samuel Brooks's unmistakable handwriting, were 5 simple words: "People I never wanted to forget." Grace gently placed the notebook into Michael's hands. "He asked me to keep it until you were ready." Michael slowly opened the first page. Instead of names, he saw short stories, dozens of them, each about an ordinary person Grandpa Samuel had met throughout his life. A lonely widower, a young waitress working 2 jobs, A frightened little boy on his first day of school. A soldier returning home. A widow sitting alone at church. Each page ended with exactly the same handwritten sentence. Everyone is carrying something we cannot see. Be gentle. Michael turned another page. Then another. The notebook contained more than 100 stories. More than 100 lives. More than 100 moments when one man had simply stopped, long enough to care. And suddenly, Michael realized this journey had never been about discovering why the watch had stopped. It was about learning how Grandpa Samuel had lived every minute before and every minute after 4:17. Michael returned to Willow Creek, carrying more than a notebook. He carried a new understanding of the man he had called Grandpa for 43 years. For most of his life, Samuel Brooks had seemed wonderfully ordinary. He never appeared on television. He never received awards. He never became wealthy. Yet somehow, the worn leather notebook resting on the passenger seat beside Michael suggested something extraordinary. Not because it contained remarkable stories, but because every story began with someone everyone else had overlooked. The next morning, Michael brewed coffee using Grandpa's old enamel pot. The kitchen smelled exactly as it had every Sunday morning during his childhood. He sat by the window, opened the notebook, and began reading from the very first page. The handwriting was careful. Passion. Each page carried a date, a first name, and a memory. No last names, no addresses, no praise. Only simple moments Samuel wanted to remember. The first entry read, January 14, Frank. Met him outside Miller's grocery. His wife had passed away 6 weeks earlier. Everyone asked him if he was doing all right. Nobody waited long enough to hear the answer. We shared coffee for 40 minutes. He smiled before we left. Sometimes people don't need advice. They simply need someone who isn't watching the clock. Michael slowly closed his eyes. He remembered Frank. As a child, he often wondered why Grandpa sometimes came home late from buying groceries. Now, he finally knew. The next page. April 2, Lutze, 7 years old, terrified on her first day of school. Walked with her to the classroom. She never let go of my hand. Children borrow courage until they discover their own. Michael smiled. Samuel had never mentioned Lucy. Not once. Page after page. The pattern continued. A widower afraid of eating alone. A teenager who believed no one noticed him. A waitress studying at night to become a teacher. A veteran who visited the cemetery every Tuesday. A boy saving allowance money to buy his mother birthday flowers. A woman sitting quietly in church after losing her husband. Every story was small, almost invisible. Yet somehow, together, they painted the portrait of a remarkable life. Michael noticed something else. Every page ended with a sentence. Never exactly the same, but always carrying the same gentle reminder. Kindness is rarely remembered by the person giving it. The smallest conversations often become someone's strongest memories. No one should leave feeling invisible. If you have enough time to worry, you have enough time to encourage someone. Michael smiled. Those sounded exactly like Grandpa. Simple words, quiet wisdom. Never preached, only lived. By the third afternoon, Michael had finished nearly half the notebook. Then, one page made him stop. Across the top, only one word appeared. Me. Michael frowned. Samuel had never written about himself. Not until now. The entry was short, very short. Today I almost drove past a stranded truck. I was tired. My knees hurt. Dinner was waiting. For a moment, I told myself someone else would stop. Michael read more slowly. Then I remembered. Kindness isn't measured by convenience. So I turned around. It wasn't easy, but very little worth doing ever is. Michael sat in silence. Even Samuel, the kindest man he had ever known, had moments when helping others required a choice. Kindness had never come from perfection. It came from deciding, again and again, to care. That realization comforted Michael more than anything else. His grandfather hadn't been born extraordinary. He had simply practiced compassion, one ordinary day after another. Late that afternoon, Michael walked across town to Miller's grocery. The same little market still stood on the corner. Its bell chimed softly as he entered. Mrs. Carol Jenkins stood behind the register. She had owned the store for nearly 30 years. When she saw Michael, she smiled warmly. "I've been expecting you." Michael laughed. How does everyone know I'm asking about Grandpa? Carol smiled. Because everyone has a Samuel story. She leaned against the counter. Want to hear mine? Michael nodded. I'd love to. Carol looked toward the front window. Rain had just begun falling outside. Small drops tapped gently against the glass. It happened 15 years ago. I was having one of the worst days of my life. My husband had just started chemotherapy. The store was struggling. I didn't know how we'd pay our bills. I tried smiling for customers, but inside, I was exhausted. Michael listened quietly. That afternoon, your grandfather came in. He bought exactly one loaf of bread. Carol laughed softly. I remember thinking, that's all? He looked at me, and instead of asking, how are you? He asked, Carol, how heavy has today been? Michael blinked. No one had ever asked him a question quite like that. Carol smiled sadly. I couldn't answer. I just started crying. Samuel didn't panic. He simply waited. When I finally finished crying, he slid a folded napkin across the counter. Inside, she whispered, was $50. I tried giving it back. He shook his head. Then he smiled and said, one day, you'll help somebody else. That's how you'll repay me. Carol looked around her little grocery store. Do you know what I did? Michael smiled. I think I do. She nodded. For 15 years, every Thanksgiving, we quietly pay for someone's groceries. We never tell them why. Michael felt warmth spread through his chest. Grandpa's $50 had never really disappeared. It had simply kept traveling, from one person to another. As Michael walked back toward the farmhouse that evening, the church clock began striking the hour. Children laughed somewhere down the street. A couple walked hand in hand beneath colorful maple trees. An elderly man slowly carried groceries for his neighbor. Life continued, in countless small acts of kindness, just as Samuel had believed it would. Back at home, Michael opened the notebook again. Near the final pages, he noticed something unusual. A folded sheet of paper had been tucked carefully between two entries. Across the front, in Grandpa's handwriting, were 7 words. Read this only when you're ready. Michael gently rested his hand upon the envelope. He did not open it. Not yet. For the first time in many years, he understood why Grandpa never hurried important moments. Some truths needed a quiet heart before they could be heard. Outside, the grandfather clock in the hallway continued ticking. Inside Michael's pocket, the silver watch remained forever still. One clock measured passing hours. The other measured a life that had been beautifully spent. The envelope rested quietly on the kitchen table. Michael looked at it for a long time. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted long golden shadows across Grandpa Samuel's porch. The old rocking chair beside the window moved gently in the breeze. No one was sitting in it. Yet somehow, it still felt occupied, almost as though Samuel had only stepped inside for another cup of coffee. Michael poured himself one last cup, not because he wanted coffee, because that was how Grandpa always began important conversations. Never in a hurry, never standing, always seated, always present. He carried the warm mug to the table, then slowly picked up the envelope. Across the front, Grandpa's handwriting appeared as steady as ever. Read this only when you're ready. For the first time since the funeral, Michael felt ready. He carefully unfolded the letter. The familiar handwriting filled both sides of the page. My dear Michael, if you've reached this letter, then you've already discovered something important. The watch was never the treasure. Neither was the notebook. The treasure has always been the people. Michael smiled softly. That sounded exactly like Grandpa. The letter continued. When I was young, I thought success meant working harder than everyone else. When I became older, I thought success meant earning enough to take care of my family. But after your grandmother, Evelyn, became ill, I learned something much greater. Michael slowed his reading. Every word seemed carefully chosen. No one remembers how busy you were. No one remembers how many hours you worked. No one remembers how perfectly you kept your lawn. People remember how you made them feel. Michael looked toward the front yard. Grandpa's garden had never won awards. His fence was never perfectly painted. But every neighbor remembered him. Not because his life was perfect, because his heart had been open. He continued reading. Growing older teaches us something young people rarely understand. Time becomes more valuable, not because we have less of it, but because we finally understand who deserves it. Michael paused. Those words settled deep inside him. He thought about his own life, the endless meetings, the canceled family dinners, the phone calls he promised to return tomorrow. How many tomorrows had quietly disappeared? The letter continued. After I retired, many people asked how I stayed so busy. The truth is, I wasn't busy. I simply stopped saying, maybe another day. Another day isn't promised to anyone. Michael quietly wiped his eyes. How many times had Grandpa driven across town just to visit someone for 15 minutes? How many birthdays had he attended? How many hospital rooms had he quietly entered with flowers or homemade soup? At the time, Michael had thought Grandpa simply had extra free time. Now, he realized Samuel had been making a choice. Again, and again, and again. The next paragraph was underlined. Only once. Never become so busy making a living that you forget to make someone else's day brighter. Michael remembered being 10 years old. Grandpa had stopped the truck because an elderly woman was struggling to carry groceries. Michael had sighed impatiently. We're going to be late. Samuel had smiled, then asked one simple question. Late for what? At the time, Michael couldn't answer. Even now, he smiled through tears. The letter continued. You may be wondering why I never repaired my pocket watch. It wasn't because I wanted to remember an accident. It was because I wanted to remember a decision. Michael slowly nodded. He finally understood. At patru, shaptes prezece. I could have kept driving. No one would have blamed me. Someone else would eventually have stopped. But kindness often arrives because one ordinary person decides. If not me, then who? Michael read the sentence again. If not me, then who? He whispered it aloud. The words lingered in the quiet room. The afternoon sunlight had begun fading. Its golden glow now rested upon the silver pocket watch beside the letter. The frozen hands reflected softly. Still, patient, waiting. Grandpa's letter continued. One day, someone will need your time. Someone will need your patience. Someone will need you to stop, even when it's inconvenient. When that day comes, don't think about me. Think about them. Michael closed his eyes. He suddenly realized Grandpa had never wanted to be remembered. Not really. He wanted kindness itself to be remembered. Near the bottom of the page, the handwriting became slightly shakier. Age had found Samuel's hands, but not his heart. There is only one inheritance I hope to leave you. Notice people, especially the quiet ones, the lonely ones, the ones everyone else walks past. Most hearts do not break loudly. Listen carefully, and you'll hear them. Michael could no longer hold back his tears. He folded the letter slowly, not because he had finished reading, because he wanted to remember every word. The farmhouse was completely quiet. Only the ticking of the hallway clock filled the room. Tick, tick, tick. Time continued moving, even though Grandpa's watch never would. As evening approached, Michael stepped onto the front porch. The air smelled of fresh-cut hay and fallen leaves. Across the road, Mrs. Eleanor Harris was struggling to carry 2 heavy grocery bags from her car. She paused halfway up the walkway, trying to catch her breath. 20 years earlier, Samuel Brooks had reached a different crossroads. He could have driven on. Instead, he had stopped. Michael smiled, almost without thinking. He walked across the road. May I help you with those? Eleanor looked up. Her face brightened immediately. Oh, Michael, thank you. He carried the groceries inside. It took less than 3 minutes. 3 ordinary minutes. As he turned to leave, Eleanor smiled warmly. You know, your grandfather used to do that every Tuesday. Michael laughed softly. I know. Then he looked down at the pocket watch resting inside his coat pocket. Still, for the first time, he understood something beautiful. The watch had never been asking him to remember the past. It had been inviting him to choose the future. Winter arrived gently in Willow Creek. The maple trees that had once glowed with autumn colors now stood quietly beneath a blanket of fresh snow. Christmas lights shimmered from front porches. Wood smoke curled lazily from chimneys. The whole town seemed to breathe a little slower this time of year. Michael had lived through many winters, but this one felt different. For the first time since Grandpa Samuel's passing, his grief no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful, like an old photograph carried safely inside his heart. Every afternoon, Without really planning it, Michael found himself looking at the clock, not because he was waiting for something, because he remembered. 4:17 分, the moment Grandpa had chosen to stop, the moment that had quietly changed two lives. One snowy Tuesday, Michael was leaving the grocery store when he noticed an elderly gentleman struggling to load bags into the trunk of his car. The man's hands shook from arthritis. One bag slipped. Oranges rolled across the parking lot. Several people walked by. Some smiled politely. Most were simply busy. Michael remembered Grandpa's letter. If not me, then who? He smiled, walked over, and began gathering oranges. The elderly man chuckled. I suppose they were trying to escape. Michael laughed. I don't think they got very far. Together, they finished loading the groceries. It took perhaps 5 minutes. Before closing the trunk, the man looked at Michael. So, you've made an old man's day a little easier. Michael simply smiled. So did someone else for me. Driving home, Michael noticed the dashboard clock. 4:17 p.m. He couldn't help smiling. That evening, he opened Grandpa Samuel's notebook again. On the final blank page, he wrote just one sentence. December 12th. Helped Mr. Collins with his groceries. Grandpa was right. 5 minutes can still change a day. Michael closed the notebook. It no longer felt like something that belonged only to Samuel. It had quietly become part of his own story. As Christmas approached, an idea began forming in his mind. Nothing grand, nothing expensive, just simple, exactly the way Grandpa would have liked. On the Sunday before Christmas, Michael spoke briefly after the morning church service. Only 20 people remained inside the sanctuary. Most had gray hair. Many had known Samuel all their lives. Michael held up the silver pocket watch. Its hands still rested at 4:17. He smiled. My grandfather believed that one ordinary moment of kindness could outlive a lifetime. The congregation listened quietly. No one interrupted. I'm not asking anyone for money. I'm not asking anyone to volunteer every day. I'm asking for 1 minute. People looked at one another, curious. Michael continued. Every afternoon, at 4:17, before dinner, before television, before bedtime, let's all pause for just 1 minute and ask ourselves, who needs a little kindness today? The church remained silent. Then, Mrs. Eleanor slowly stood. I can call my sister. We haven't spoken much since her husband passed. Mr. Jenkins smiled. I could shovel Mrs. Parker's sidewalk. Someone else quietly said, I know a veteran at the nursing home who never gets visitors. Another woman smiled. I'll bake on extra pea. Within minutes, ideas filled the little sanctuary. No committees, no speeches, no paperwork, just neighbors, remembering one another. The following afternoon, at exactly 4:17, something beautiful happened. Mrs. Eleanor picked up the telephone. She spent 40 minutes talking with her younger sister. They laughed. They cried. Before hanging up, her sister whispered, I've missed you. Across town, Mr. Jenkins quietly cleared snow from 3 driveways. No one saw him leave. A teenage boy delivered homemade cookies to an elderly widow. He stayed only long enough to hear one story about her late husband. At the nursing home, a retired school teacher received flowers from someone she hadn't seen in years. None of these people knew about one another. They simply knew. It was 4:17. Weeks became months. The tradition quietly continued. No newspaper covered it. No television station visited. There were no awards. No social media campaigns. Just ordinary people, choosing not to hurry past someone else. Exactly as Samuel had done. One afternoon, Michael stopped by the town diner. The waitress smiled as she poured his coffee. You know, she said, I've started watching the clock too. Michael looked up. You have? She nodded. Yesterday, at 4:17, I sat with an elderly customer whose wife recently passed away. I was behind on my tables, but somehow, it felt more important. Michael smiled. Grandpa would have approved. As spring arrived, the town slowly changed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in quiet ways. Neighbors greeted each other more often. People lingered a little longer in conversations. Children learned to hold doors open without being asked. Even strangers seemed less hurried. One afternoon, Michael visited the old bridge, the place where everything had begun. Wildflowers now grew beside the roadside. Birds nested in nearby trees. It looked peaceful, almost ordinary. He took Grandpa's pocket watch from his coat. The silver case had become warm from years of carrying it. He opened it. The hand still rested at 417. For a long time, he simply stood there, listening to the wind, watching sunlight dance across the river below. Then, very softly, he whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa. Not for the watch, not for the notebook, not even for the stories, but for teaching him that a meaningful life isn't measured by how far we travel or how much we own, but by the number of times we choose to stop for someone else." As Michael turned to leave, his phone rang. It was Grace. Her voice sounded brighter than ever. "Michael, I think you should come to Cedar Ridge next week." Michael smiled. "Why?" Grace laughed gently. "Because I have someone I'd like you to meet. He has been waiting a very long time. To thank your grandfather." Michael looked once more at the silent watch. Another chapter, still waiting to be written. The following Saturday, Michael drove back to Cedar Ridge. The journey felt different this time. There was no mystery left to solve, no unanswered questions, only gratitude. The silver pocket watch rested quietly in the inside pocket of his coat. Its hands still pointed to 417, as they always would. Grace welcomed him with her familiar smile. "You made good time." Michael laughed. "I had a feeling you wouldn't tell me over the phone." She shook her head. Some conversations deserve to happen face to face. Samuel would have approved. They drove together to a small, brick building on the edge of town. A modest sign stood near the entrance. It read, "Cedar Ridge Senior Living Center." Michael looked at Grace. "I thought you said someone wanted to meet me." Grace smiled. "He does. He lives here now." Inside, the building was warm and peaceful. Old photographs decorated the hallways. Soft piano music drifted through the lobby. Several residents sat together working on a large jigsaw puzzle. One gentleman quietly read the morning newspaper. A woman knitted a tiny blue sweater for her newest great-grandchild. The whole place felt less like an institution and more like home. Grace led Michael down a quiet hallway. She stopped outside room 114, then gently knocked. A warm voice answered, "Come in." Sitting beside the window, wrapped in a soft gray blanket, was an elderly gentleman with kind blue eyes. His white hair had grown thin with age, yet his smile carried remarkable warmth. Grace stepped forward. "Henry, I'd like you to meet Michael Brooks." The old man looked at Michael for only a moment. Then his eyes slowly filled with tears. "You," he whispered, "you have Samuel's smile." Michael smiled gently. "You knew my grandfather?" Henry nodded. "For more than 30 years." Michael looked surprised. 30 years? Henry chuckled softly. "Though, he never knew my name." Michael frowned. "I don't understand." Henry looked toward the window. Outside, a pair of cardinals landed on a nearby tree branch. Then he began. 28 years ago, I lost my wife. We had been married 53 years. When she passed, I stopped leaving the house. I stopped answering the telephone. I stopped attending church. I even stopped smiling. Michael remained silent. He knew grief often arrived like that. Quietly, completely. Henry continued. "One afternoon, I finally forced myself to drive into town. I parked outside Miller's Grocery, but I couldn't make myself go inside. I simply sat in the car. For almost an hour." Grace looked toward Michael. She had never heard this story either. Henry smiled faintly. Then, someone knocked gently on my window. Michael already knew who it had been. "It was your grandfather." He smiled, as though we were old friends, and he asked me, "Would you mind keeping an old man company while he drinks his coffee?" Henry laughed softly. I almost said no, but something about his smile made it impossible. They sat together on a park bench, drinking coffee, watching birds, talking about ordinary things. Baseball, gardens, weather, old tractors. Nothing important, yet somehow, everything important. When we finished, Henry said quietly. He stood, shook my hand, and smiled. "I'm glad you came into town today." Then he walked away. Michael smiled. "That was all?" Henry nodded. "That was all. But He looked toward the ceiling for a moment. It was enough. I came back into town the next day, and the day after. Little by little, I started living again. Grace gently asked, "Did you ever see Samuel after that?" Henry smiled. "Many times. We'd wave. We'd talk for a minute. But I never told him." "Told him what?" Michael asked. Henry looked directly into Michael's eyes. "That he saved me." The room became completely still. "I wasn't drowning in a river," Henry whispered. "I wasn't trapped in a car. I was drowning in loneliness." And he noticed. Michael lowered his head. He remembered Grandpa's words from the notebook. "Most hearts do not break loudly." Henry slowly reached beside his chair. From a drawer, he removed an old photograph. It showed Samuel sitting on a park bench, holding 2 paper coffee cups. Smiling, Henry handed it to Michael. "I asked someone to take that picture. It's the only photograph I have of my friend." Michael carefully held the faded picture. It wasn't perfect. It was slightly blurry. Samuel wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at Henry, listening, exactly as he always had. Grace quietly wiped away tears. "I think that's the real gift he gave people. His attention." Henry nodded. "These days, everyone is looking at something. Your grandfather." He looked at people. They sat together for a long time. No one hurried the conversation. No one checked the time. No one needed to. As the afternoon sun began lowering, Michael stood to leave. Henry reached out and gently held his arm. "There is one favor I'd like to ask." "Anything," Michael replied. Henry smiled. "Don't put the watch in a drawer. Carry it. Not because it's valuable, but because," he gently tapped Michael's chest, "it reminds this, to stay open." Michael quietly nodded. "I promise." Several weeks later, back in Willow Creek, the little 417 tradition continued growing. No organization, no membership, no announcements. Only neighbors, quietly caring for neighbors. Children visiting grandparents. Friends calling friends. Volunteers sitting beside lonely patients. Young families inviting elderly neighbors to dinner. No one kept score. No one expected recognition. Kindness simply continued. Just as Samuel had hoped, one spring afternoon, Michael returned once more to the old bridge. Wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze. Birdsong echoed across the river. He opened Grandpa's pocket watch one final time. The hands still rested at 4:17. He smiled. Then, instead of closing it immediately, he whispered the words Grandpa had written years before. "The treasure was never the watch. The treasure has always been the people." Michael slipped the watch back into his pocket, not to preserve the past, but to carry it into tomorrow. He turned and began the walk home, noticing, for the first time, an elderly woman struggling with her grocery bags across the street. He smiled, crossed the road, and without saying a word, reached out to help, because that was how legacies truly lived. Not in museums, not in family heirlooms, not even in stories, but in ordinary people, choosing, again and again, to stop for someone else. Final reflection. As we grow older, we often believe the most valuable thing we possess is time. But perhaps, the greatest gift is not the amount of time we have left. It is the willingness to give a few moments of that time to someone who needs them. One conversation, one smile, one phone call, one visit, one helping hand. These small moments rarely make the news, yet they become the memories that stay in another person's heart for a lifetime. So today, if you happen to glance at a clock and it reads 4:17, pause for just a moment. Think of someone who may be lonely, someone who may be grieving, someone who simply needs to know they have not been forgotten. Because in the end, a beautiful life is not measured by the years we lived. It is measured by the number of hearts that beat a little lighter. Because we were here.